Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
Go 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Larkcast, and a special welcome back to the Larkcast to Russ Johnson.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back.
We've been going through the book of Galatians on the Larkcast. If you'll notice the last, I don't know how many episodes we've been going through that book, but sometimes life happens. And life has been happening to the Johnsons. Some pretty tough and life-changing events. So we've been, skipped the last, few weeks, and a lot of you guys are very aware of what's been going on with Russ and Krista and their oldest son, Blake. But for those who don't know, Russ, man, why don't you just share a little bit about what's been going on and give everyone an update? I know all the Larks have been, loving on you guys and praying and looking for updates and, stuff like that, but might have a few who, just don't know what's been going on with you, man. So why don't you share?
Yeah. So about, I don't know, couple weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, I kind of had an abrupt halt in life, a screeching halt to all that has become normal, I guess you could say, for me. My oldest son, Blake, 25, healthy, strong, lives on his own, foreman at a company. The guy who's never sick, never even gets a cold. I'm being serious. We always laugh about that. Like 10 years since he's needed to go to a doctor. He had a seizure out of nowhere. Called the ambulance and went to the hospital. Got set up at the hospital. They ran a bunch of tests. Everything seemed to show up normal. And so they put him in a waiting room waiting to do an MRI. And while sitting there, went into another seizure. Choked, led to what the doctors called a code blue. They had to perform CPR at cardiac arrest, in which case they then moved him to putting him on a medically induced coma ventilator as they tried to explore what in the world is going on with his body. During that time, he had another seizure that night. And then the following day, when they tried to do an MRI while he was asleep, he went into a 20-minute long seizure. It's kind of like 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, but lasted about 20 minutes. So he's in the ICU and in a coma for 4 days. During that time, ICU doctors were great, just to be clear, but they don't have like the bedside manner, that their focus is like keeping you alive. So, they just come out and they're like, yeah, we just did an MRI. There's a spot in the front part of his, left lobe of his brain. Doesn't look good. Let you know more when we know more. And then you just like disappear. And as a parent, you're just sitting there with that, like your stomach in your throat.
Yeah.
So we sat and slept next to a hospital bed for 4 days, and then they moved him, for 3, and then they moved him to Tampa General Hospital. And he spent the next 4 days there. So in the hospital for a week. Ran every test under the sun and just finally landed on kind of a rare form of epilepsy that he's just developed. They don't know why. And they're saying there, can be a normal future for him. but the next 6 months while they really try to work out medication, he can't drive, can't be left alone, can't sleep alone, nothing for the next 6 months. And for this very hardworking dude who loves his work, loves the woods,
Yeah.
independent. I mean,
Right.
this is a guy who got his first job at 14 when we lived in the city of Chicago, cleaning offices,
Yep.
and has worked and paid his way ever since. And I think it's hard. Kind
Yeah.
of in a funky place, man. But
Hard.
he's
Hard's an understatement.
yeah. Yeah, I literally sat and slept next to a hospital bed for a week with my wondering if the pain in your throat is ever gonna subside. And just as, as a dad, man, just not even as a dad, as a human, I've never had to encounter anything like that. Just the unknown, man. It was hard.
Yeah. And I think just listening to you share, I don't think everyone um who, is connected to Larkin knows and loves you, even from afar, as
Yeah.
we've, ministered to them on here and just shared good news and brought encouragement and stuff. It's kind of like the weird thing about, having a podcast, is like people feel a
Yeah.
connection to you, even though maybe the friendship isn't, there in the everyday. I think this is probably the first time a lot of people have really heard, some of the details. And I know you're leaving some stuff out too. And
Yeah.
yeah, man, just very hard. Um, but I know like a lot of people out here, who've gotten to know you in Northwest Indiana, everyone was like reaching out to me, telling me that they were praying, caring for you guys. I'm sure you guys really,
Yeah,
appreciated
dude.
that, and that meant the world to you. And
A
um,
lot of people, man, just reaching out, praying with us, praying for us. People I haven't seen in a long time, people who listen to this podcast, man, like sending, hey man, here's the $25, dude. Go get dinner. Here's breakfast tomorrow. Here's
yeah,
you know, Josh and Vicky, man, locally, like sitting with us at the hospital for, morning to night, right? Grabbing a flight and a rental car for my mother-in-law to come stay with our little dude so Krista and I could live at the hospital. And Michael and Noel, man, putting us up and taking care of us in Tampa, man. And, while we were there, I'm just saying, like, just so many people, man, just, coming around us, local, afar. Did we had people that have been listening to this podcast and encouraged by it that I've never even had real conversations with, sending support, man. Love you guys. It meant it meant it meant a lot.
yeah. Well, we're not out of the
Thank you.
woods yet, and we keep praying uh,
Yeah.
for Blake and to get this medication figured out, um, and to still pray for healing and to get this dude back wrenching on big equipment, on site equipment,
Yeah.
and back to hunting and a normal life. So, um, we love Bubba and we love the Johnsons. On behalf of the Larks, we're going to keep praying for you, man, and still be here for
Appreciate
you.
it. Yeah. No, really, 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 I do. And I'm with you. There's always a scare with the kind of epilepsy that he has, and not going on a bunch of details. Nighttime, you know, sleeping. That's the one, right? Let's just say if you aren't a bedtime prayer person, it'll make you one pretty quickly. And
No atheists and foxholes. No
no,
atheists when you realize your son's got epilepsy.
yeah, it was I think the thing for me that just all this update, it ties into a bigger narrative
Mhm.
for me personally. It ties into some things that I felt like I could that I experienced, some things that I heard from the Lord on, and really just pretty something kind of special, man. Like even at Christmas time, you know, I think Christmas for a lot of people is, I think Christmas for a lot of people is sad. That's something that I found, man. Just living at a hospital, especially Tampa General Hospital, which is a phenomenal place, dude. But Tampa General Hospital, no lie, is bigger than most like small cities. I mean, it's dude, there's a valet service, man. It's it's insane. And just being at this hospital, man, and just meeting so many people in the hallways and in the waiting rooms and
Mm.
on elevators. And I always wondered, man, in life, like at Christmas time. I remember being a little kid. My mom had this Christmas book. I think it was a something in regards like Norman Rockefeller, and it's all these like paintings and pictures and stories around the world. And I remember being a little kid, and every Christmas I would sit down with this massive book, right? And I just loved looking at the pictures. And I can always remember these pictures that they had in the book during the Vietnam War. And it was like soldiers like got a break, you know what I mean? And they would like, like eating, you know what I mean, like a Christmas morning or Christmas afternoon, like dinner together, in a foxhole, man. But then they showed pictures of like things that would take place later that day, and it just never in my brain, I can remember being a kid and going like, I can't imagine like war or harm or hurt on Christmas. It just seems like if you were at war, you would just like blow a whistle and everybody take a 24-hour break, you know? But it just wasn't the case. And I can remember being a little kid and just not understanding that. And my whole life, always wondering, like, man, what do people do with heartache and hardships at Christmas time? It just seems like it should be like a month that we get off. And I can remember like going through all this stuff with Blake, and it's Christmas time, and like we were right in the middle of like planning a Christmas dinner and shopping, and it's like everything just hits a halt, man. I didn't even There's Christmas trees everywhere, but I don't think I don't think I noticed one of them once.
Hmm.
It's like you're just so dialed in on like what's in front of you, you don't really encounter it. However, when the tension, you know what I mean, of that week subsides and there's a next phase, that's when you start to see the lights and hear the songs and you know what I mean? And wonder like, okay, so what's the rest of the season look like? And I was just thinking about that, man. Like for a lot of people, man, around the world, Christmas is sad
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons. And Sarah Condren with Mockingbird recently wrote an article, and in it, I'll just read this really quick. But I feel like she really just kind of captured the essence of this. She says, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe the most beautiful part of Christmas is actually the sadness. Because if we try to ignore the grief and pain of our human existence, then we are left with the worst part, a command to be happy at Christmas.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh. She says, it seems a ridiculous expectation that the day we remember the birth of our Savior is the same day that we expect some sort of euphoric joy. Jesus comes to us in the ruinous trenches that we dig and decorate. Such a killer line. He comes to us in the most broken parts of our hearts. And so to experience some kind of mandated electric happiness feels like it misses the point of Christmas entirely.
All together.
The truth about Christmas is that it holds everything all at once. You can be happy and you can enjoy um, that family Christmas get together, but you can also dread it. you
Hmm.
know, you can love buying gifts for everybody and also go broke. I'm just saying, like, you can have fun with this, but you can also see, like, no, man, there's real life and real pain and real heartache because this is part of the real human experience. There is beauty and joy, but there's also sorrow.
Yeah.
and worry and doubt and fear. And Christmas is a time that holds them all together. And I think there's a beauty, man, in remembering that, man, what we're celebrating here is the God who the God who looked at a species that was trying to overcome its existence, right? Like we're all trying to overcome our humanity. And the story of Christmas is a God who's looking at us and loving us so much so that we can embrace what we actually are, decides to become the very thing we're trying to overcome.
Mm.
He becomes human.
Mm-hmm.
He unites himself to our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
He literally takes up residence in the deepest, darkest parts of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he sits and now lives.
Yeah.
And dude, that is beautiful and life saving, right?
Yep.
But
The phrase
yeah,
for me, that's made sense the last few years is because of the incarnation, because God became flesh, entered our human existence, brought his light into our darkness so that we
yeah,
could see the light and the beauty of who God really is and be sober minded about who we really are. Because everybody has an ideal scenario. Everybody's
yeah,
chasing something, I mean, you
yeah,
just mentioned, finances. That's a big one. Career. Maybe you want your family,
yeah,
to be different. Man, I wish this awkwardness or disconnection I have with my children wasn't there. I wish my house was more full. I wish I didn't have that falling out with my uncle, a few years ago. There's all the familial
mm,
stuff, the financial stuff, the health stuff. And it's like we always imagine this, ideal scenario. We want what life to be better. In a lot of
yeah,
ways, we struggle underneath like what ought to be. But in the incarnation, God is forever the God of what is and not what ought to be.
yeah.
He's the God of what is. He came
It's a great way to
into
put it.
this scenario, our lives, and he came to be present in it, to promise his presence, to show us that he's a God of love. He's a God of grace. He didn't just stay in heaven, just kind of with a hand saying, come on up, let's go, let's
Yeah,
rise, let's be victors. I
yeah.
need you all to be victors in this life. um
You need to do hard things so you can become this better version.
yep.
Yeah.
Do the
Come on,
hard
let's
thing.
go. Build that
um
ladder.
mm-hmm. Climb the ladder, grow, rise. And in a lot of churches you'll hear that, but in
Yeah.
Christmas God came down. And
It really is the scandal, man.
it is.
I think we think the crucifixion is the scandal or the resurrection is the scandal. Don't get me wrong, they all work together. But I think that for me, I'm learning to see the incarnation as maybe the ultimate scandal.
Hmm.
It's 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 God literally choosing to become human, fully human. Everybody's like, yeah, but he's also fully God. I know, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he exists in full humanity,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing every single thing we experience, identifying with us. And all of this literally just to show us I've always been with you. Always.
Yeah, so we
What else
think
do I have to do?
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like it's like, like,
we think
like,
the commitment of God to us is on the other side of our commitment to him.
yeah,
The love of God is reserved, um and finally attained when we live a life of love for God. And the gospel is just the complete opposite. Even when we
Yeah.
were just ignorant, alienated, just alienated in unbelief, thinking that God worked the same way that our jobs work, our families work, these relationships work, politics work, corporations work, all of it. Life works.
Mm.
And man, you come to find out it's not that way at all. And so what a comfort. And too, like the commercialization of the season. Like I'm in marketing, dude. Like these assets we create, about the experience of, you know, dining in little villages of igloos or gift cards or, celebrating the season. It's all
Yeah.
exclamation marks in the
Yeah.
copy. It's never question marks. It's never, it's
That's
never
a good way
doom
to
and
put it.
gloom. It's all just very, very happy. And so the expectation to be happy, the expectation to be, celebrating the season and
Hmm.
um, creating all these like happy, memorable moments. And it's just not how life is. And when you experience like a
Yeah.
real trial, like you guys did, and you guys are in right now, man, that has a way, like C.S. Lewis says, it's like God's megaphone, to rouse a deaf world. Because, dude, you can get lulled into some apathy and you can get lulled
Hmm.
into a lot of things, man, in this life when things are kind of the status quo. Um, but pain and hardship, and it's funny how it works, right? Like those are the things that kind of tune us in to
Yeah.
the reality of the gospel.
Yeah. It was like this kind of beautiful reminder of the meaning of Christmas, man. Like when you're going through something like that, because, you have various people, man, with various beliefs. And, I'd meet people on the elevators like, yeah, man, my daughter's kind of going through the same thing, but, it wasn't this crazy rare form of epilepsy, but, it's actually, meningitis, and she hasn't walked in 6 months. That's how long we've been here. But and you're just sitting there like, oh my God,
Mm,
like just these stories. And for some people they were embracing it. And for some people, like they were almost kind of like trying to find a way to put an exclamation point on a question mark, like you said.
mm,
And I just found myself like just remembering like Jesus doesn't promise to make this temporary life here a bed of roses. We live in a real world, and all of its frailty and all of its shit because of just the arrogance, man, of humans who want to be God
mm,
and all that comes from that. But God in his grace has chosen to set up camp permanently in and among us. And he doesn't promise that he's going to turn this into a bed of roses. So I don't know what's going to happen, right? But I can just remember sitting there and going, but I know he's present.
yeah.
I know he's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, okay, so, come hell or high water here. It's like he is he is present, and
Yeah.
that's what he promises to be. And so at no point have we ever been alone, or will we be. And I can remember like just thinking about that, man, like staring out this window, these like lit up Christmas trees on the roof of the hospital, for the city to enjoy. And I kind of found myself like thinking about prayer, and it was kind of cool. I'm just going to go ahead and say this, and maybe this is another story for another day or a blog post or something. I don't know. But I can remember like in the heat of the first few days, people are like, well, man, we're just praying, we just pray the Lord's will be done. You just got to pray, right? Jesus said, pray, a kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I can just remember sitting there like starting to pray that. And I'm like, I can't pray this. I can't. I'm like, no, no. You're staring at your kid on a ventilator, man, with a cap on that has 1,000 wires coming out of it because they're trying to check what's going on in his brain, and tubes up his nose and tubes down his throat. And he's strapped to a bed in case he, wakes up and tries to pull him out, and stuff monitors all over his heart and pads on either side of the hospital bed so he doesn't hurt himself if he does go into a seizure. And you're just like, no, no, I'm not praying that will be done. And dude, it was like this crazy little moment when I started to remember some of the verses that we've unpacked on this podcast. I started thinking about that John series, and the biggest aha for me in the John series was John 6,
Mm.
where Jesus says, I know a lot of you are running all over earth trying to figure out what the Lord's will is. And you all think it's this little red dot and this crazy maze and how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And everything you do in life will either get you on or get you off track. So he just basically says, so let's just make it clear. The will of my Father in heaven is that you believe in the Son in whom he
Yeah.
sent.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, it was like this peace came over me, man. Like then this fear of praying the Lord's will be done, because what if his will is not my will?
Right.
Right. And instead, I'm just pleading with him that his will be my will. And dude, all of a sudden, I think about that verse and I'm like, oh my God, I can sit here and pray, yes, Lord, I want your will to be done. I want, because that's what that literally means is I want everyone on earth to believe in the Son who is present in and among us.
Hmm.
Merry Christmas. I want the earth to believe this good news just like heaven does.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no life apart from this. There is no hope. There is no joy. There is no meaning. There is no purpose. There is no forgiveness. I mean, it's just everything is meaningless
Yeah.
apart from knowing this truth. And so I'm like, yes, Lord, I pray your will be done. I pray that the earth will believe in you as they do in heaven. And it freed me up to then begin to just talk to the Lord about what I was really feeling in the moment.
Hmm.
And how I was really struggling. And it was like this peace came over me, man, and his presence. Again, the story, Emmanuel, God with us.
Yeah.
His presence with me in this, his presence with my family in this, his presence with my son in this bed in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk to him about my hope and what I'm longing for with like a courage, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of this like tiptoeing around getting the right prayer here and just hoping to God that his will's mine.
Yeah.
And dude,
It,
it was like a piece on one end, and then on the other end it was like a fire. Like this thing in me of like, damn, I can't imagine the millions of people who are going through similar things right now
hmm.
who don't have this peace. And it
Well,
was like, wow, wow.
well, and his presence with you, regardless of whether you trust it or not,
Yeah.
regardless of whether
Yeah.
you trust it a lot or a little bit or waver even within a span of 10 minutes, which is what
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you were experiencing. The high
Oh,
highs of
dude.
like
Yeah.
trusting and a heart full of faith, and the low lows of just not believing and wanting to control.
Yeah. And
And
these doctors and their reports, man, and what they're thinking it is and where it's going. And then it's not like, yeah, we'll be right back. It's a drive-through window. You know what I mean? And they're coming back in like, at least 5 minutes with an update. It's like, no, we'll be back in 48 hours
yeah.
while you sit in this, you know? And yeah, dude, your brain can go up and down. And is it enough faith? And did I doubt at this moment? And you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden, all this pressure's on you to get this prayer right in hopes that it will turn God's affection toward what it is that you desire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm like, man, what a shitstorm that is. Instead
Right.
of just being able to boldly go, yes, Lord, I want to join you. I want to join you in seeing in earth believe in the Son as they do in heaven. Because there is no life apart from it. And that freed me up to go, but right now, here's where I'm at, and here's what I'm feeling, and here's what I'm struggling with, and here's what I'm hoping, and here's what I'm asking for. And just knowing And in the highs and in the lows, he's present.
Yeah.
Be-
Dude, that
that
is,
is what the season reminds us of.
yep.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
God is good and he's present, even in the midst of real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the Sarah Condon quote, because the expectations, are a lot. Expectations, you have for yourself, the expectations of others around you, especially when you're going through suffering.
Yeah.
Um, and expectations, they work a lot like the law, you know.
Yeah.
Um, like nothing compared to what you got going on, but some of my kids are just kind of going through it right now,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
and
it's
just
real what they're going through. Yeah.
a little bit of some depression, some hard friend stuff, and man, you just want to create a scenario or bring them down and play a game and get it out of them, and you just kind of
Yeah.
think, yeah, man, after a few days you're going to be better. And I was just talking to Pam last night, and I was like, man, I think we gotta just curb these expectations and thinking that we're going to do something, to get them out of this. And it was on the heels of having a conversation with you, and it's like, man, the good news of the gospel is just God's presence, despite how
Yeah.
long it takes, despite if we ever get over the hump. And that sort of
Yeah.
like no strings attached commitment, relational commitment, um that it almost feels impossible, from a human standpoint, but that
It does.
is the kind of love that we're loved with. And it's a healing love, it's a freeing love. It's not necessarily a love that fixes.
No,
um
freeze.
it can, at times it can be healing, but it certainly is freeing. So, man, I don't know who's listening to this or where you're at or how this is hitting you,
Yeah.
but man, this is some freaking primo 200 proof good news right here,
It
dude.
is. Yep. Despite all that
Top
you have thought,
shelf freaking
felt.
gospel shit right here, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoever you are, wherever you're at, whatever you've done, whatever you're doing, at the core is the reality that God loves the real you're trying to overcome. He's united himself to the real you're trying to overcome.
Yeah,
He
and you know
lives
how
in the
you
darkest part of the real you're
yeah,
trying to overcome.
because you'll hear this, like, different friends who have lost parents this last year, or gone through some
Hmm.
stuff. It's always like, yeah, man, I'm just trying to be strong, I'm just trying to hold it together for my family. There's this
Yeah, I get that.
always, it's just like this natural human bent to just sort of try to be someone other than who you actually are, or to be at a place where you're not actually at.
Yeah.
And the good news is, right, the angel came to Mary, his name shall be called Emmanuel, God with us.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And he's set you free to recline in that reality. It's it's in the letting go, man, the giving up that you find life.
Amen,
You
man.
find the anchor. And I remember that hitting me, man. I was praying to that, dude. I was trying to be strong for the family, man, keeping it together. I think I did pretty good for the first 3 days. And then when they had to keep him on this ventilator and all these machines, and they were working through all these scenarios of how to get him on this bed in this sterile room to do this spinal tap, and I had to go down there with him and just watching all that happen. You know what I mean? And he's just kind of like lifeless there in it, dude. I couldn't. I remember my wife looked at me and I was like, I can't be strong anymore. And but again, like he's highs and lows, man. He's present and he's good. He's not going anywhere. And there is coming a day, right? When the sorrow and the tears will be gone. But I ain't gonna lie, man. I used to say, well, bring that day now, or just remove that now.
Yeah.
But honestly, man, I don't. I think there is so much to experience, and there is so little you'll actually see without it.
Yeah.
That for the first time in my life, I'm like, okay, I think I get it now.
Man, I hate that it's like that, though.
So
I really wish we could
yeah,
come to the realization of these things, you
Yeah.
know, by eating the best ribs and drinking the best wine we ever had in
Yeah,
our
me
life
too.
and being on the best vacation ever.
And it would all just come clear,
It would all just, yep.
and we would just
There.
welcome the beauty of dependence. Yeah,
Dude, the
but
fact that
instead,
the fact that life's most beautiful truth, which is what we've been talking about, is often discovered in the midst of like real pain.
yeah, yeah,
That's hard.
yep. But it's in the words of someone I knew in the past who was going through the ultimate trial, man, hardship. I remember, people around her were like, so, so are you giving up? Are you giving up? And she said, no, I'm not giving up. This is just the story that I've been given. And so I'm going to lean into it. I was like, damn. And man, she did, with a sense of faith and peace in that dependence. And it was like, man, I'm talking to someone who's experienced the reality of Emmanuel. God is with me.
Well,
I was like,
on that note,
okay, there it is. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
He's good. And we
Wherever
really can
you are.
rejoice.
Yeah, wherever you are, whatever your version of this is, just know you're loved. God's present. And that move of him towards you, that commitment towards you, it's not hinged or tethered at all to how you are responding. It's just because he's good. Amen.
Dude, that's it.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.